Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry that I had to ask many of you to leave the room while I dealt with the other matter. I think all I can tell you by way of explanation is that I had to consider a matter on the basis that certain aspects of the proceedings of the inquiry might have a prejudicial effect on proceedings elsewhere, and I've made an order restricting reporting of the matters we've just been discussing in your absence until further notice. Right, now we'll get on with the business of the inquiry. Yes, Mr. Robert.
Mr. Chairman, what I would propose to do now is to read into the record two statements that link to evidence that you heard yesterday from Mr. Paulos Tekle.
Yes, thank you.
The first statement that we put into the record, Mr. Chairman, is that of Genet Shiferaw, the partner of Mr. Tekle, and the reference for that is at IWS 401050.
Yes, thank you.
It is the statement of Genet Gebramariam Shiferaw, and if we go please to page 16. The statement is dated the 4th of September 2018, and it is signed with a statement of truth. Mm-hmm. There are, Mr. Chairman, 5 exhibits that accompany the statement, which have been identified as GS1 to GS5, and they are pages 17 to 21 in the same document. If I may, I propose just to read out some extracts from the statement, but as we have made clear, I hope, with all other statements that we've put into the record so far, the statement goes into the record in its entirety and is considered in its entirety. As you will have heard from Mr. Tekle himself, Genet is his partner, the mother of his 2 sons, and she was present in flat 153 on the 14th of June 2017. And in her statement, she explains that she moved into flat 153 in June of 2016, where she was living with her 2 boys. If I take you, Mr. Chairman, to page 3. Mm-hmm. Just want to read paragraph 7. I moved in after the refurbishment had been carried out. In the flat, there were problems with the windows. They were not airtight and had a draft coming through them. The windows in the lounge and the bedrooms were especially bad in cold weather, and we put towels by them to try and restrict the drafts. I reported this a number of times. I went personally to the TMO office, and also I reported it in writing. I was never given an answer. 2 of the lounge windows were not working properly and did not open. When I reported this, someone was sent to fix it, but they couldn't. I was told that someone else would come to fix it, and although I repeatedly asked, I was never given an answer, and no one came. If I move forward in the statement, please, to paragraph 11 on page 4. The Shiferaw there says, on the Saturday before the fire, I was at home in the flat with, and there's a name redacted, which is the name of her younger son, and Isaac. I was expecting a friend to come by, and there was a knock on the door. Isaac ran to open the door, and it was a fireman who wanted to test the smoke alarms in the lobby. He walked into the flat, and right by the front door, there is a fire alarm. He pressed the button, he said, "It's working," and he stepped back out the door again. It worked, but it was no louder than a mobile phone. There was also a smoke alarm in the kitchen, but he did not test that. Since the time I moved into the tower, I was never given any information about fire safety. Mr. Chairman, if I may now just turn to Ms. Shiferaw's account of the fire itself and the night of the fire. And as I explained, and as you will remember from Mr. Tekle's evidence, the family came back home that night and were together and put the children to bed that evening. And if we go, please, to page 7 and paragraph 22. In the statement, Ms. Shiferaw explains, I stayed up. did some housework, prepared some homework for the children, and got their clothes ready for the following day. And I went to bed about 12 midnight. I went to sleep, but was later woken by Paulos, who asked me if I heard noises and shouting. When we heard the noises, we looked out of the door. We went together and looked outside. We saw our neighbour from flat 152. She was there with her children. I could see her clearly, though we could see smoke. I could smell smoke, but we could see each other clearly. I asked her what was going on, and she told me that there was a fire in the building. When I finished talking to her, I went back inside to the living room. I know that Paulos made the first call, a 999 call, from my phone. And if I move forward just to paragraph 25, Ms. Shower continues, between 1:32 and 2:54 a.m., we were calling our friends from the tower, or they were calling us. On my phone log, I can see a call at 1:32 to Abraham, Isaac's friend's dad, from the 7th floor. Paulos made this call from my phone. At 1:39, I tried to phone Nura on the 22nd floor, but her phone was busy. Because of this, I rang her on her son Yaya's phone. The first time I called, no one picked up. But on a second call at 1:43, I spoke to Hashim and told him it was Genet. He asked me how I was, and he said that they were in their house as well. He said that he'd phoned the emergency services and they told him to wait and not to leave the flat. He said that he was sitting together with his children, and he advised me to do the same with my children, and that the emergency services would come and take us out and rescue us. I tried to call Nura again at 1:49, but got no answer. We then opened the door again to our flat to see what it was like. There was more smoke than on the previous occasion. I saw the man Lushit who lived in Berkty's flat 155. He was in the lobby area and asked if he could come into our flat. I asked him, where's Berkty and Baruch? And he said they had left. I said yes, and he came in. We went into the living room. He said there was a huge fire and we were talking about what we should do. At this stage, it was smoky outside the flat. There was no smoke in the flat. There was a knock on the door around 2 a.m. Yehelushet Enyu, who had come into our house, ran to the door with us following him. When the door was opened, there was a firefighter in uniform. Paulos told the firefighter that there were 3 adults and 2 children in the flat and asked what we should do. I believe he'd come to rescue us. He said to stay in the flat and put a blanket around the door and cover every hole to stop the smoke coming in. And he said, you're safe. Of course, I believed him. We thought the fire must be somewhere in the building, but it was not coming up. We could not see flames on our side of the building. I could see flames if I looked out sideways out of the window on the other side. So I believed the fireman at this point. The statement continues, I don't remember a female firefighter being at the door, only a male. We were all standing at the door waiting to be rescued. I would confirm that the conversation with the firefighter took longer than 20 seconds, as he was giving us instructions to block the door with towels to stop the smoke coming in. If I could move forward in the statement to paragraph 32 on page 10, please. It continues, we closed the door and we covered the postbox with a plastic bag which we stuck down with plasters. And we then covered the door with a blanket. We then sat down to wait because we trusted the advice the firefighter had given us. We felt a bit more at peace and a bit calmer because he told us it was safe. We kept ringing friends, or they were calling us and they were telling us to leave. We thought that we were going to be rescued, as the firefighter had told us we were safe. So we stayed where we were. But as time went on, we started to become more and more scared. Isaac was crying. My second son was crying. They were scared. After some time, there was a knock on the door again. We thought it was the firefighter coming back, but when I opened the door, it was my neighbour from flat 152 with her 3 children. She asked if she could come in. She said that the fire was in her kitchen. I told her to come in, and she came in with her children. We were all making calls to friends outside the tower. Paulos was calling 999 and calling friends. I was speaking to my friend Adiam and told her to call the emergency services and tell them we were in flat 153 and we were there with children. I told her to keep calling them. If I move forward to paragraph 35, it continues, we had our mobile phone lights on and we were shining it through the window and shouting help, help through the window. The fire was increasing. I opened the kitchen window and smoke started coming in. I checked the gas and the water, which we normally shut off at night. The fire was increasing, and Paulos said we should leave, that he would take Isaac and I would take our younger son, and we should jump out of the window, so at least our bodies would be found and our bodies would not be burnt. He was by the open window in the living room. Paulos made a further call to the emergency services, and we were told to wait. We were still hoping to be rescued, but we were becoming desperate. Paulos spoke to Abraham again. After Paulos finished talking to Abraham, Paulos told me that Abraham had said the fire is very bad and you have to come down. You have to get out. At 2:51, Adyam called me again and told me that she'd phoned the emergency service and the operator was crying and said they could not control the fire. They had told Adyam to tell us to get out and take our chances. Paulos had another call with the emergency services around the same time, and he told us they had said that we had to leave now. I didn't hear the phone conversation, but it was what Paulos told me. He said that we had to get towels, wet it, put it in our mouth, and get out. I arranged this for everyone in the house. I went to the bedroom and got towels and bed sheets from under the bed. I wet them in the bath. The water was not coming out of the taps very fast. I sorted out towels for everyone in the house, and as I was preparing mine, the man who'd come into the house, Lushit was standing at the door. I told him not to open the door until we were all together by it, and I was ready, otherwise the smoke would overcome us. I was not ready. I didn't even have anything on my feet. But he opened the door anyway, and he was repeatedly saying who he should look after, who should he hold, referring to the children. The conversation was in a loud voice. My younger son was crying and screaming on the floor. I was shouting about the door being open and the smoke. Lushit was shouting loudly, "Which one do you want me to hold?" So there was a lot of commotion with the door open, and a firefighter was standing outside on the lobby a few feet away from the door. Paulos tried to give our younger son to Lushit, but our younger son refused to go out with him and was rolling around on the floor. And as I was looking after our younger son, the man still kept repeating, saying, "Who shall I hold for you? Who shall I hold for you?" So we gave him Isaac, and Paulos managed to pick up our younger son. The firefighter had a light, but it was not very bright. Isaac and Lushit went out first, and we all followed. I was the last one to go out. I had no shoes on. I had no wet towel. The firefighter never spoke to us. He did not tell you how to hold on or what to do or what to expect. He did not offer to take any of the children. The smoke was overwhelming. We could not see each other. No one could see each other. The door to the stairs was already open when I got there. I don't remember opening it. I only know that I reached the stairs, not anything else. Smoke was overwhelming. I was about to fall down on a few occasions. I was trying to hold on to the rail. I tried to hold on to the firefighter. He was ahead of me, but I could not reach him. He was not carrying any of the children. He was just going down on his own. I was struggling for breath. It was disorientating and confusing. It was very difficult, and I did not wish to go into too much detail here, as it's very distressing. When I got down to the lower floors, I could see there was a light. I saw Paulos was slumped on the floor holding on to our younger son. He couldn't get up. I took our younger son from him, and we met a firefighter, and he took our younger son from me in the lobby. Mr. Chairman, I propose to end there, but as I've said, the entirety of the statement goes into the record. Can I read now into the record a statement from Lushit. It's dated the 17th of July 2017, and it is a statement made by Mr. Enyu to the police. And so whilst it doesn't carry a statement of truth, it carries the statement at the top that it's true to the best of my knowledge and belief.
Yes.
And so that statement, its reference is at MET 407347, and it's a 3-page statement. And again, The entirety of that statement goes into the record, but I wish to read some extracts from it.
Yes, thank you.
And these extracts relate to the events of the night. On page 1, the statement reads, "I was in my bedroom at flat 155 Grenfell Tower at about 1:15 hours. I woke up. I could smell smoke. My window was open. I could see sparks of light and smoke outside my window. As a result, I realized the building was on fire. As soon as I realized, I came out of my room and shouted to Berkti Haftom, 'Fire, fire, Berkti, fire.'" If we go over, Mr. Chairman, to the second page, and just picking it up from the beginning, the second paragraph, which begins going back to the incident. The statement reads, "Going back to the incident, I was looking for my trousers and my passport. Berkti was shouting to me, 'Come out, come out.' By now, it was about 1:20 hours. I heard her voice in the doorway of the flat and the front door slam. I was now beginning to panic. I had 2 pairs of trousers on. I left the flat a few minutes later with my passport, birth certificate, and important documents in a folder in the communal area. I saw a lady I've met before called Genet. She lives at flat 153 with her husband and her 2 children. Flat 153 is directly opposite flat 155. I walked towards the communal stairway and opened the door. It was filled with thick, choking smoke. I thought it would be best to stay on the 18th floor and wait to be rescued. I went with Genet to flat 153. By this time, her husband was just outside the flat. We went inside. Inside flat 153, we could see lots of people outside. We were shouting, 'Help us.' At this point, we could see lots of firemen, but no fire engines. At this point, I'd not yet called 999. We stayed in the flat until about 0200 hours. A fireman with breathing apparatus knocked on the door. I asked him, 'Are we safe in here?' He nodded his head as if to say yes. I then said, 'Have you controlled the fire?' He nodded his head again as if to say yes. The fireman said to me, 'Open the windows, get fresh air, close the door, and prevent smoke coming in.' A short while later, a lady from flat 152 came to flat 153 with her 3 children. I do not know their names. I called police at 0231 hours. I said there was a fire. We're on the 18th floor, we need help. The lady from flat 152 said her flat was caught on fire. We started to notice that the fire was coming from flat 152 on the outside of the building. We closed the window on the south side of flat 153 and moved to the window on the west side of the flat. By this time, the children were shouting and screaming. It was like hell. At about 0330 hours, there was another knock at the door, and the husband from flat 153 said to us, let's get some cloths and soak them in water. He said the firefighters are outside the door. We all assembled by the door. I had the 5-year-old child on my right hand. The husband had the 3-year-old. I went outside. I grabbed a fireman with my left hand. I had the boy in my right hand. The others were behind me. There was thick, black, choking smoke. You could hardly see. There was more than one fireman. There was confusion. I said to the fireman, "Go, go." I was hoping to be led to safety. The fireman was leading me down the stairs. My left hand was tucked into the right arm of the fireman. As we went down, it became harder and harder. We were choking on thick, black smoke. We were becoming exhausted and confused. At about halfway down the building, I realized the 5-year-old boy was no longer with me. I was beginning to lose consciousness. I was mentally exhausted from the trauma. The fireman was still with me. I was leaning on him. Without the fireman helping me, I could not have made it out of the building. As I exited the building, I was given oxygen by the fireman. Mr. Chairman, that's all I propose to read from that statement.
Thank you.
Just hand over to Mr. Millett.
Yes, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I propose to take over the reading and read statements relating to the evidence that you heard yesterday afternoon from Rabiya Yaya.
Yes, thank you.
Relating to her floor. And much of this comes from friends and family who were in contact with her on that night. Can we start, please, with the statement of Khadija Yaya? She is Rabiya's mother. The statement is dated the 1st of June 2018, and there's a statement of truth at page 11 of that statement, and the reference is IWS 50664. And she explains that she had moved into Grenfell Tower, into flat 42, with her husband Mohammad in around 1986, after the birth of her first child. And prior to the refurbishment, it was the fourth floor. And then they moved to Barrington Walk and had been living there for over 20 years before the night of the fire. And their flat is in the middle of Barrington Walk. In addition to Rabiya, there are other daughters she has, and she's explained who they are in her statement. And she says, as we know, Rabiya lived at 152 Grenfell Tower. She describes the night of the fire in some detail. Can I pick it up at paragraph 23 of her statement, on page 5 of that statement? And she explains that she had gone to the tower, and she says in the second sentence, I remember my brother and my sisters running over to me. There were a lot of other people surrounding the building as well. I think it was around 1 a.m. to 1:15 a.m. I remember looking up to the tower and seeing people above the flames on the same side of the building, screaming, crying and waving for help. There were a lot of people around me on the grass who were also crying and screaming for help. I remember seeing a lot of familiar faces, but not really acknowledging anyone. I think I may have seen some of the Al-Wahhabi family, who are close friends of ours, but I cannot recall exactly who. Everyone seemed desperate to help. Some, particularly the younger ones, wanted to go in. My son-in-law's brother, Ubaida, got into a fight with a policeman because we could see pools of firefighters congregating on the grass verge but doing nothing. It just seemed to fuel everyone's frustration. The smoke started to become overbearing from where we were stood underneath the sports centre. The police started to push us back, which was when the debris apparently started to fall. I don't remember seeing any debris. I just remember focusing on the fire and smoke. The police pushed us back to Avondale Park Road, where we congregated. We were stood on the corner by number 40, where the road meets Thresher's Place. Tension was mounting as we were watching the fire spread. Within 10 minutes of being outside, the fire shot up the right-hand column of the east facade. I think this would have been 1:15 to 1:45 a.m. It seemed like there was a pipe that the fire spread up. It shot up as fast as you can imagine. It was like switching on a torch. It looked like petrol or gas had been sprayed on the pipe. I didn't feel like I could be any more panicked, but when I saw how quickly it spread, I felt completely helpless and more overwhelmed than I could cope with. I felt hysterical. The fire seemed to veer round towards the north facade across the top of the tower, and then come back around the east facade and head towards the south facade. As it started to come back round the building towards the south facade, it was heading towards Rabiya's flat. I was in sheer panic and couldn't bear to look at the devastation unfolding before my eyes, but my head was unable to move. There was a constant background noise of people screaming, but my eyes were fixated on Rabiya's flat. I knew she was in there, and I knew I couldn't help her. My sister covered my face with her scarf so I couldn't see how the fire was developing. I remember collapsing. I don't remember what I was saying, but I remember being absolutely hysterical. My sister and my sister-in-law were trying to lift me back to my feet. Each of them held me underneath my arms, but I had no strength. I was inconsolable, and my legs would not work. I'm unsure of the timings, but it may have been around the 2 a.m. mark when the fire reached Rabiya's flat. I think this because I vaguely remember my brother encouraging people to drink water. It would have been the last opportunity for the day. However, I was unable to concentrate on anything but Rabiya's safety. At some point during the course of the evening, my son had returned to the flat to collect our phones. Rabiya called and was initially speaking to Mohammad. He put her on speakerphone and someone passed the phone to me. She was saying her goodbyes. She was very calm, but telling me she loved me and asking me to let her dad know that she loves him very dearly. She said she was going to pray and would call back. I knew these could potentially be her final moments. I was still on the floor at this point, unable to comprehend the gravity of what was going on. I remember a few minutes later Rabiya calling back. She was on Nyla's phone and told us that the fire had hit her flat. She had gone to her neighbour's to take shelter, but the fire was worse at his, and he was trying to jump from the window. Mohammad and my brother were demanding her to leave. They were pleading with her and telling her to get wet towels and cover their faces. She said the smoke was too bad, but thank God she eventually agreed to try. Rabiya stayed on the line as she tried to escape, but didn't talk. We could hear their footsteps running down the stairs and other people's screams, then suddenly nothing. I truly believed she had died. I was completely inconsolable and think I fainted. Everything is a blur from here onwards. I remember coming round and hearing someone who sounded really far away saying, "I can hear footsteps. She's coming. She's alive. Wake up." Someone was trying to rouse me with the reassurance that Rabiya was alive. And then she continues with the rest of the description of the night and how she was reunited with her family, her daughter's family. Like all these statements, Mr. Chairman, that statement in its entirety will stand in the record and be evidence to and be taken into account in its entirety. The next statement is the statement of Mr. Mohammad Mrimu, which has a reference of IWS quadruple 01172. And he was a friend of Rabiya's. And he describes from paragraph 19 his arrival at the fire and his first observations. He has exhibited a number of videos which are also part of this statement and can be found in a number of exhibit numbers, which I shall read into the record now. IWS 196, 189, 195, 188, 194, 190, 191, and 187. And at paragraph 22, just reading that, he says, "I had a friend who lived in the tower on the 18th floor. His name is Bilal. He was not there on the night of the fire. However, he had a wife called Rabiya and children who lived with him. I knew Bilal and his dad Ahmed since 2005. I called Ahmed and asked him to call Rabiya to see if she was in the flat. He never called back. I thought I had a chance to go help her. I wanted to go in and help her." And then he describes how the fire spread. And at paragraph 26, he says, "The fire was bright red at this time, and there it was covering the whole east side of the building. I could see people in their windows with their lights on. This can be seen in the video I took of this at 2 a.m. when I was standing on Grenfell Road." And then at paragraph 28, he says, "Bilal's family and I wanted to get closer to the tower to help and know what was going on because Rabiya's phone had stopped working. We decided to go inside through the middle door and up to the door on the north of the walk by the tower and Grenfell Walk. We opened the door. At this time, the fire was everywhere. It was covering the three sides of the tower. It was a red fire with a lot of thick smoke. It was extremely hot, and we found ourselves being unable to move forward because of the heat. At this time, 2 police officers came, and I started recording. This video was taken at exactly 3 a.m. In this video, you can see the fire on the building and the police. The policeman was speaking to Bilal's family and said, 'Do not go there, you will kill yourself. You cannot stay here because of the heat.' I spoke to Bilal's family and told them to stop and think how to help. From here, I could see firefighters on the balcony, on the tower, and there were 2 firefighters who were closer, using a hose to try and put out the fire. This can be seen in the video. I decided to leave." And then at paragraph 38 on page 8 of the statement, he says, I went to my wife and children and said, "Let's go to your sister's." It was now morning time, about 4:30 or 5 a.m. I took a video at 4:33, which shows that the fire was everywhere. It was a dusty red colour. I was standing by Avondale School, which is near a house. Everyone I saw was upset and crying. Somalian, Sudanese, Moroccan, all communities. One of my neighbours from the black community was crying near the church. I encouraged him to pray. I went with Layla to her sister's and sat there with my children. All the children were panicking and thinking about people who had died. I was shocked. I couldn't stop thinking about the fire. I couldn't stop thinking. I went back again to see if I could help anyone. I saw a fireman, and he was very tired, in a van close to Barrington Walk. I asked him about those who died, and he said that there was many, and he had not seen something like this before. I saw then that he was physically and emotionally exhausted. I started helping, giving people water and blankets and other things. I went back to Avondale School and made a video. This video was taken at 5:04 a.m. The video shows that the fire had gone through the building, and there was a lot of smoke. The fire can still be seen from the inside. And like that, like all the other statements, again, that statement will stand in its entirety
Yes.
as evidence to the inquiry and be taken into account accordingly. The next statement, Mr. Chairman, is from Layla Rehani, who is the wife of Mohammad Ramu, and that has a statement of truth at page 10. It's dated the 18th of May 2018. In fact, I say that. I don't think it does have a statement of truth at that page. Nevertheless, I shall read it in. And she describes her experiences of the night from paragraph 21 onwards, and her first observation of the fire at 28 and 29, and at 45 to 47, to 48, she describes what she saw by way of fire spread. And she says at paragraph 45, at page 7 of the statement, the fire moved up and up and up. It reached the sides, but I do not remember how it spread to the sides. I just remember it going up high. It looked as if the fire had 100 floors to travel. It would have carried on and taken over all 100 floors. The tower was making a weird squeaky and crackling noise. There was cladding falling off the tower onto the ground in front onto the grass. It was so red in colour, bright red. The fire was spitting out from the tower. And again, that statement will stand as evidence into the record and be taken into account accordingly, subject to my properly identifying the statement of truth, which is actually on page 10 of that statement. The next statement, Mr. Chairman, is a statement from Salamawit Tezgay, and that is IWS 955. There's a statement of truth on page 3 of that statement. It's dated the 18th of May, 2018. Ms. Tezgay is the sister of Berkti Haftom and the aunt of Buruk Haftom, about whom you've heard a little bit, of flat 155 on the 18th floor of Grenfell Tower. And she says that she lost her sister Berkti and her nephew Buruk on the night of the fire. And she says, at paragraph 8 of the statement on page 2, Berkti and Buruk were very happy in Grenfell Tower, but my sister raised many concerns with regards to the refurbishment that recently happened, as her radiator was always leaking and the flat had become very cold. You could physically feel the wind blowing from underneath the windowsill, and you could see it as it blew the curtains that covered the window. I'm aware that my sister made complaints to the TMA, but I believe that her concerns were never properly answered. And I'll just read paragraphs 10 to 14. She says, on the morning of the 14th of June, 2017, I was sleeping at my home at Ladbroke Grove, and my sister's boyfriend, Mickey, called at my house. He told me that something was wrong with Grenfell Tower, and we should go there immediately. I therefore ran to Grenfell Tower, and it seemed everywhere that I went was blocked by police and fire brigade. I met with my sister Negeste, and we frantically ran around the area outside of the tower trying to find the whereabouts of my sister and nephew. As we looked up at the building, we could see how intense the fire was and how red the flames were. There was also an acrid smell in the air from the smoke, and I was so worried and concerned for the safety of my sister and nephew. As we frantically searched for our family, we came across Genet, who was from a country and lived on the same floor as my sister. And this gave me hope that they'd escaped. The lodger who lived in my sister's flat was also with them, and he had advised us that my sister and nephew had left the flat before he did, and therefore they must be out. Tragically, I understand that rather than coming down the stairs, my sister and Buruk went upstairs, which unfortunately was the wrong decision. As the night became daytime, we moved our search from Grenfell Tower to the hospitals that the injured had been moved to. As we went to the various hospitals around London, we were given no information as to whether our family were in there. And it wasn't until a few days later that we were told to give up hope, as clearly they had been lost in the fire. It also saddens me that Berkti died when she was pregnant, having had it confirmed by her GP, and it would have been a further addition to our loving family in London. And again, Mr. Chairman, that statement will stand as evidence in its entirety in the record and be taken into account. The next statement is IWS 1115, a statement from Asyema Alula, Asiema Alula is the sister of Berkti Haftom and the aunt of Buruk. It carries a statement of truth on page 3 above the signature and is dated the 20th of May 2018. She says at paragraph 9 of the statement, "When reflecting upon the flat that my sister and nephew lived in, I remember Berkti complaining about the refurbishment and how much colder her flat was. I personally remember the plastic around the windows and finding that rather odd. To me it seemed that there was too much wind that was blowing around the flat, which caused concern." In paragraphs 11 onwards, she describes the morning of the 14th of June, and I'll just read paragraphs 11 to 13. She says, "I was in bed when I got a call from my sister's boyfriend at about 1:30 a.m. and he told me that there was a problem at Grenfell Tower and that it was on fire. I woke up my 2 boys and I put them in the car and drove to Ladbroke Grove. And on the way I was calling my sister, but she was not picking up. I also tried my nephew's phone and did not get through. When we got to the tower, it was ablaze and it frightened me. I was calling, 'Where is my sister?' and 'Where is my son?' I refer to Buruk as my son at times. Given that my children were with me, I had to calm myself down, and eventually I found my sisters, Salamawit and Negeste. I remember the dark smoke that was emanating from the building, and there was a real acrid smell in the air. We could see the people in the building calling out for help, but it seemed we could do nothing. We just spent the night crying." And again, that statement will stand in its entirety as evidence to the inquiry,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, and will be taken into account accordingly. The next statement is the statement from Negeste Semre, which is IWS 954. Negeste Semre is the other sister of Berkti Haftom, about whom you've heard. The statement is dated the 18th of May 2018, and it stands under a statement of truth on page 5 over that date. And she says at pages 2 to 3, paragraphs 12 to 15, after the refurbishment, she says at paragraph 11, at paragraph 12, she says, "The flat was very cold." And she goes on, "Despite the windows being closed, there was always a breeze in the flat. The curtains would blow in the breeze. There was a whistling sound from the windows. I was able to open the window in the front room of my sister's flat and be able to put my hand down in between the windowsill and the outside cladding. There was no cap on the cladding, and it seemed strange to me that it had been left this way. My sister was concerned about the work that had been completed, as she had signed a petition that the residents had put together to complain about the way the building was after the refurbishment." And then she describes at paragraph 18 onwards her experience of the fire, and I'll pick this up if I can at paragraph 22. "The lodger told us that he was woken by the smoke and went and knocked on the bedroom doors of Berkti and Buruk. He told them that they must leave the flat immediately. He decided that he would change out of his pyjamas before leaving, and thus went back into his bedroom. He told us that our sister and nephew therefore left the flat before him. When he told us this, we therefore had hope that if he was able to escape the building, then surely they must have done so too, as they left before him. We kept trying Berkti's mobile number, but we were unable to get through to her. Her phone went dead around 7 a.m. By the morning, we decided that we must now start searching the hospitals to find them. We spent the next 5 days going from one hospital to the next, in the hope that they made it out. By the 5th day, we gave up hope. We lost our beautiful sister and our beautiful Buruk. We subsequently found out that when Buruk and Berkti left their flat, they took the decision to go upstairs rather than to come down. Buruk's friend Jessica, who was the same age as Buruk, 12 years old, had borrowed Berkti's phone and had been talking with her mother for 55 minutes before they lost communications with her. Jessica, Buruk and Berkti died together on one of the floors above the 18th floor where she lived." That statement, like all the others, will stand in its entirety in the record and be taken into account in full. The next statement is IWS 1086. This is a statement from Nahum Tesfaye Gabrigajaber. It's dated the 9th of August 2018, or rather it's signed on that day if one looks at page 2, and there is a statement of truth on page 2. He describes himself as the son of Berkti Haftom and the half-brother of Birak Haftom, about you've heard. And he explains the relationship that he had with his family. And he says at paragraph 9, I just wish to tell the inquiry that I've been robbed of a life of getting to know my mother and brother on account of the fire that took place in Grenfell Tower on the 14th of June 2017. And again, that statement will stand in its entirety as evidence in the record. Finally, Mr. Chairman, for this afternoon, I come to IWS 679. IWS 679, which is a statement of Michele Chiappetto, who was Berkthi's partner. That's dated the 4th of June 2018 and stands under a statement of truth on page 5 of the statement. And he explains how he met Berkthi, first of all, in London in 2011, and his relationship with her, and how they lived. And from paragraph 9 onwards, his experiences of the night of 14th of June 2017. And one can read that, and I'll just pick it up at paragraph 15 and 16. At 15, he says, I thought that Berkthi might have been in touch with Selam Tezgeh, who lives nearby, and I was trying to get as many people as possible to look for Berkthi. I managed to meet with Selam at her place. With others, we spread out to continue to look for Berkthi and Birak. At this time, I didn't doubt that they'd got out of the building, but I was worried that they might be injured. I knew that Berkthi's instinct would have been to get out of the building as soon as possible. It would have been common sense to get out of the building. We were looking continuously. At about 3 a.m., a friend of Berkthi's saw the lodger, Lushit. He said that Berkthi had left the flat before him, and he had remained behind to change his pyjamas. He told us that by the time he left the flat, curtains were on fire. He also said that after leaving, he spent time in another flat across the landing. The information he gave was very confusing. All through the night, we were trying to call Berkthi. Her phone was ringing until 7 a.m. when it stopped. I noticed that at 6:40 a.m. Berkthi had logged into the message at Viber. I'm now confused at how this can have been possible. And he explains what he did after the fire. And again, Mr. Chairman, that statement will be taken into account in its entirety and stand as evidence in the record. Mr. Chairman, that's all I was proposing myself to read this afternoon from evidence relating to that flat, that floor.
Thank you. And I think, it's right that I should express our thanks to all those who took time and trouble to make these statements, and they will be taken into consideration in full as part of the evidence before the inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm now going to hand back to Mr. Rawat, who has a further set of statements to read for the rest of the afternoon.
Oh, right. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Rawat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I will put into the record statements from 3 members of the Kadir family. You may remember that on the 9th of October you heard oral evidence from Maher Kadir.
Yes.
And his wife and 2 of his daughters have made statements to the inquiry. And if I put the 3 of them into the record formally first, the first statement is at IWS 50205. And that is the statement of Mr. Kadir's wife, Iman Al-Qudi. If we go, please, to the 10th page. We see that there is a statement of truth. It's dated the 18th of May 2018 and signed. There are no exhibits that accompany that statement. The second statement is of a daughter of Maher Kadir, Wala Kadir. Her statement is referenced at IWS 50208, please. And the last page is again signed with a statement of truth and dated the 18th of May 2018. And again, the statement is not accompanied by any exhibits. And the third of this trio of statements is the statement of Rawan Kadir, also a daughter of Maher. Her statement is at IWS 50204. 9th page has the statement of truth signed and with a date of 18th of May 2018. And again, this statement has no accompanying exhibits. As you may remember, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kadir, his evidence was that he was living in June 2017 in flat 64 on the 9th floor with his wife and 3 daughters, 2 of whom are Rawan and Walla. Mrs. Al-Khudi and the 3 girls had moved into the flat a few months before the fire. Mr. Kadir himself had lived there for a number of years. But as he told you, on the night of the fire, all 5 members of the family were at home. The girls themselves shared or slept in the living room. To give an indication of the experience that they went through on the night itself, I propose to read an extract from the statement of Rawan. And if I could take you, please, to IWS 50204, and if we go to paragraph 11, please. And this is Rawan's account of the night. Paragraph 11 on page 3.
Yes, thank you.
So, as I've explained, the family were at home, and in this part of Rawan's statement, she explains 2 windows were slightly open. My sister, and the name's redacted, smelt a burning smell, and then she said, I think there's something burning. I just remembered when she said that I thought someone may be cooking, so I shut both windows as they were slightly open. Although I shut the windows, about 20 to 30 minutes later, this burning smell intensified. We got suspicious. And name's redacted, but it's my youngest sister, was leaning her arm on the wall and it was getting really hot. She could hear a crackling noise as if something like burning wood. Then Walla stood up and looked through the window. Though the window was shut, she wanted to check where the burning smell was coming from. We both stood up and opened the window. Walla stood first, then I followed. We saw a fire coming from the right side of the building. It was huge and scary. There was burning and black smoke. This is about 1 to 1:30 a.m. I can't remember the time that the smoke was apparent. We left the window open. I don't think we closed it. Lulu, my sister's nickname for Walla, said, could it be the next door building? Could it be the school adjacent? We were unsure where the fire was coming from. We didn't think it was the tower itself as we were inside. The fire was all around from the other side. If I go to the next page, the statement continues. We went to my parents' bedroom out of panic. All 3 of us ran towards my parents' door. Lulu said, Dad, wake up, get up, yelling, next door building's on fire. Both my parents were asleep and they suddenly woke up, shocked, and said, what's going on? Dad said, hand me my crutches. They both got up and went to the window and looked through the windows. Mum got up and opened the bedroom door and let Dad get out of the door first. They both looked through the window and saw the glow of the fire. He said, it's the tower. Our tower is on fire. As soon as Dad said it's the tower that's on fire, we were all over the place and panicked more. Dad was trying to calm us down as we were panicking. He said, I think the firemen will come and put it out and take care of it. Just thinking about it now is giving me heart palpitations. The statement continues. Dad got worried and went to the front door, and he looked out, and there was a lot of black smoke. The smoke started to get into our flat. Dad said, oh, there is black smoke. Dad said, yes, you're right, we must go. I remember I had my mobile phone in my hand. As before all this happened, I was chatting on WhatsApp to my friend. My phone was still in my hand, and Dad said, we must go. I texted Dania, my friend, to say, our building's on fire. By the time we got out, my friend was saying, okay. She was waiting for a reply and saying, where are you? Why don't you answer? Are you okay? My friend was in Syria at the time. Everybody was panicking. Dad said, let's go. So we put our scarves on our head and left with our pajamas on. Everyone just rushed. We were able to see, but the smoke was there. Dad wanted to make sure that we all left before him. He was on crutches, so he was too slow. So he just said, you go ahead. There was panic. My younger sister didn't have time for a scarf, so she grabbed a hat. Walla and my younger sister went ahead of all of us, then my mum and I followed. I cannot remember whether the windows were opened or shut when we left. Once we left, my mum shut the door of the flat. Dad was the last person. He was taking his time on his crutches. We headed straight to the communal door. There was a sign written on it, fire exit. Where you push the door, you end up on the stairs to save yourself from the fire. I cannot describe this door because I always use the lift to get to the flat. I did not see any of the residents on the landing. The statement continues. There was a lot of grey smoke on the stairs, an awful burning smell like an ash plastic smell. I couldn't taste anything. I heard like a burning wood noise. My front door was wooden. The smoke was intensive. We could barely see the steps. The smoke was dark grey just above my head. I've been shown a diagram called Fire and Smoke Picture Descriptors. I describe the smoke as Picture C, which states the smoke had formed a thin layer under the ceiling down to just above head height. It was difficult to breathe. The smoke was grey when we left the flat. I was quite worried about my dad, wondering if he will make it. I had to stop every moment or so to look back. I looked back twice at different moments to keep an eye on him. I barely managed to see him, but then I was unable to see him any longer because Dad was unwell and disabled. I was extremely worried and panicking. I wished I could meet someone on the way to carry him to help him make it out. The stairway was quite narrow, but 2 people could fit, but it was squashed. My mum and I tried to rush down. We carried on down the stairs. It looked like we were one of the last that managed to walk down the stairs as we didn't see anyone. It could have been that some were unable to leave their flats. Some, I think might have died as they couldn't leave. It felt like the stairs were away from the building, as if they were not part of the tower. The reason being, normally when you come down the stairs, you would see the doors to each floor. There were no doors to the floors. There were many flights of stairs from where we lived, but I didn't see any doors. It was getting worse. By the time we got to the ground floor, I saw 4 or 5 men. Whether they were the police, I don't know. I couldn't tell. My mother was crying uncontrollably. I was crying. I said to a firefighter, "Please help my dad, he can't walk." My mum said, "My husband is disabled," and she repeated it over and over again. The firefighter said, "Which floor?" I kept saying either 64. So I think there's, as I couldn't make my head round it. They gave me a pen and there was nothing to write on, so I wrote on the wall 64. I pointed to the fireman. I pointed up saying 9th floor. We decided to wait to see what they would do. We must have waited a few minutes. The fireman went upstairs. I could not see him afterwards. Then we saw our dad coming, taking his time. By the time he got down, there was less smoke to the ground floor. We met him. We were relieved. We were able to breathe. We then saw so many people, crowds of people outside. And that's as far as I propose to read from that statement, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the last 2 statements I would ask to put into the record this afternoon, the statement of Linda Ignacio and Wesley Ignacio of flat 62 on the 9th floor. Linda's statement is found at IWS 50830. And if we have the last page up on the screen, it's page 12 of the statement. It shows that it's carries a statement of truth, is dated the 28th of June 2018 and is signed. There are 2 exhibits, EI1 and EI2, and their references are IWS 50827 and IWS 50828. I put the statement of Wesley Ignacio into the record. That statement is at IWS 50826. And as we see on the last page, page 17.
I'm not sure we've got it
It's not
yet.
come up yet, no. Statement carries the date, the 27th of June, and it's signed and accompanied by a statement of truth. There is one exhibit, the reference of which is IWS 50824. To give some background, Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Ignacio lived in flat 62 with her husband Eduardo and their son Wesley and his wife and daughter. Mr. and Mrs. Ignacio had moved into Grenfell Tower in 1983. They had a tenancy with RBKC. Eduardo Ignacio was not present on the night of the fire, but the rest of the family were at home. If I could go back, please, to Linda Ignacio's statement and just put into the record certain extracts of that statement. If I go to page 4, so it's IWS 830, page 6, forgive me. And pick it up at paragraph 30. Mrs. Ignacio says this: prior to the refurbishment, I remember seeing fire extinguishers in Grenfell Tower, but these disappeared afterwards. There was a fire extinguisher on our landing stored behind glass that you would have to break to access. There used to be one on the ground floor just before the lifts. I do not know if there were any on other floors. There were no sprinklers. There used to be a main fire alarm at the tower. I remember one time when this went off when we all had to leave the building. I'm not sure if this was for a fire drill or if there was an actual fire, but we all left the building and assembled on the grass area between the tower and the leisure centre. I think this happened before the recent refurbishment. It may have been around 2015, but I'm not sure. The only guidance I was aware of on what to do in the event of a fire came from a sign that was on the ground floor near the lifts. It said that you should not use the lifts in the event of a fire, but you should go into your flat, close the door, and put sheets around the edge of your door to stop smoke coming in. As a result of this sign, I was aware there was a policy to stay put in the event of a fire. However, my thought would always have been to leave the building in the event of a fire, as was the case on 14th of June 2017. Mr. Chairman, if I take you now to Mrs. Ignacio's account and her description of the events of 2014, and if I go to 2017, forgive me. If I go, please, to page 8 and paragraph 42. Paragraph 42, page 8, please. So the reference is IWS 508308, please. Can you just go through 2 pages forward? Thank you. Another page.
One more.
Thank you very much, Alf. Again, to just put what I'm about to read into some context, on the night of the 14th of June 2017, Mrs. Ignacio was in bed with her granddaughter, and her son and his wife were in the second bedroom in the flat. And she recalls being awake around 12:30 a.m. And tossing and turning until around 1 a.m. And if I pick it up from paragraph 42, my bedroom window was open. I was struggling to sleep properly. I was disturbed by a banging noise that sounded like bin men. I thought it must have been morning and wondered why the bin men had to come so early. I could also hear muffled voices and thought a couple was arguing. Ordinarily, I would have brushed this aside and tried to get back to sleep, but something told me to get up. I looked out of my bedroom window, which is south-facing. I could not see anything, so I went to the kitchen window, which is east-facing, and was already open. As I looked out the window, I saw a crowd of people staring up at the tower, and I could hear the commotion outside. I could also smell smoke. As I started to close the kitchen window, I saw a flamed piece of material fall from above the flat and towards the ground. I knew we had to get out of the building and started to panic. I ran into my son's room. Wesley was fast asleep and snoring. I shouted that we needed to leave as the building was on fire. He looked confused and disorientated as he had been woken up, but he soon noticed that his mobile phone, which was on silent, was actually ringing. Wesley answered, and it was Rianne, who I call Hazel. She's my goddaughter and lives on Barrington Walk. She'd been trying to call us both about the fire. Hazel told Wesley to get out of the building as it was on fire. I ran to grab my keys, phone, and a coat in case it was cold outside. Wesley wrapped his daughter, who was still asleep, in a blanket that was on my bed. After we put our shoes on, we all left together. We left so quickly that I was still in my nightdress. I think it took no more than 5 minutes for us to leave the flat after I woke Wesley. At no point did any of our smoke alarms go off while we were in the flat. I opened the flat door to discover the communal area was empty. I do not remember there being any smoke in the communal area. I was not paying close attention as I was anxious to get out of the building. Wesley left first, carrying his daughter in his arms, and Madeline followed. I was the last to leave. On the way out, I went to grab my bag, but Wesley told me to leave it. I shut the front door behind me, which I had to physically close, otherwise it would have stayed open. We headed straight to the communal stairwell, which is the only way out of the building. I do not remember seeing or hearing any of our neighbours at this time. I knew not to use the lifts in a fire because of the signs by the lifts on the ground floor. The communal lighting was working on the 9th floor landing and in the communal stairwell. When we opened the door to the communal stairwell, it automatically shut behind us. Initially, I do not remember there being any smoke in the stairway. I did not see any neighbours on the stairs. We walked quickly down the stairs. We did not run. Wesley was in front with his daughter. Madeline and I were a few steps behind. I was at the back. We sped up as we got closer to the 4th floor. This was when I started to see smoke. Visibility was deteriorating and there was a haze of white-grey smoke. It was everywhere, but you could still see through it. My main focus was just getting out of the building. I started coughing and there was a bad smell. You could really smell the smoke. And I had a funny taste in my mouth. We continued through the smoke, and by the 3rd floor it started to clear, which was a massive relief. I do not remember any smoke after the 2nd floor. I thought there would be a stampede of people leaving the building, but in fact we saw almost no one on the communal stairwell. This is surprising given it was the only way in and out of the tower and the number of people in the tower. The only person I saw on the stairs was a man with crutches who lived on our floor. I do not remember seeing any firefighters until we reached the bottom. The stairs were not slippery or wet and there were no obvious obstructions. I estimate it took us around 7-10 minutes to reach the bottom of Grenfell Tower. When we reached ground level, there was a couple leaving just in front of us. We were ushered out by police officers who kept shouting, "Keep going and get out." And that's as far as I propose to read from that statement, Mr. Chairman. But if I could
thank you.
just read a short extract from the statement of Wesley Ignacio, please. If I take you to the reference is IWS 50s82611, please. From paragraph 64, Wesley begins, "I had my daughter in my arms and opened the front door of our flat. There was a burning smell from the moment I left my front door. I saw smoke in the lobby area, but it was not thick at the time. I could see the stairwell door. The smoke was at head high and light grey in colour. I did not hear any fire alarm and saw the smoke drifting towards the left-hand side of the lobby. I did not see any of our neighbours. We all left the flat together and I closed the front door behind us. We did not use the lift. We turned left and then immediately right, opening the fire door onto the communal stairwell, which was located a few metres from our flat. I did not see any of my neighbours in the lobby area. The fire door shut behind us and we entered the stairwell. The communal lights were on. I could see smoke in the stairwell, but it was not thick. It was at head height. If I held out my hand in front of me, I would still be able to see it. I could also see the handrail. We all quickly started walking down the stairs and maintained the same pace throughout. We did not run. As we got down the stairs, the smoke became thicker, but I would still be able to see my hand if I stuck it out in front of me. I did not see any flames until I exited the tower. I was panicking and felt nervous, but tried to stay calm for my family. You could just feel that something was terribly wrong. I kept checking on my family. I told them to keep going, that everything was going to be fine. My wife held tightly onto me. At around the 6th or 7th floor, the smoke started getting thicker like a fog and darker, but I could still see my feet and my family. I was really worried for my daughter. She was only 7 months, and the smoke was obviously affecting her. I was worried because she was so small. When we got to the 6th floor, I could feel the heat of the fire. It got hotter the lower down we went. I just wanted to get out. I was really scared. My adrenaline was pumping. We passed my neighbours from flat 64 walking down the stairs on his crutches around the 5th floor. I did not speak to him, and we carried on. As we got to the 3rd or 4th floor, I saw a fireman. He was stationary on the stairwell and shouting, but I do not know what or to whom. I assumed he was shouting at other firefighters, but I did not see anyone else. This firefighter did not talk or engage with me. This was the first firefighter that I had seen since leaving the flat. I saw a hose on the stairs, but I cannot remember where. The stairs were not slippery, and I could not see any debris. We continued walking quickly down the stairs to the bottom. We did not stop. Just before we reached the foyer, there was another fireman who told us to keep going. We headed into the foyer and towards the exit. I passed Mo, who was with his dad. I understand that the CCTV footage captures us all leaving the tower via the main entrance at 1:34 a.m. I was first with my daughter, followed by my wife and mum. I estimate it took us around 10 minutes to get to the ground floor from the 9th floor. As we finally made it out of Grenfell Tower, firefighters just outside directed us to the other side of the road to Kensington Leisure Centre. There were more firefighters on Grenfell Road. Mr. Chairman, that's where I propose to stop with that statement, and also
Right.
that is the last statement we propose to read into the record today.
Thank you. Well, again, we're very grateful to those people who's provided those statements that you've been reading from, and they will, of course, all be taken into consideration.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So is that it for the day?
Yes.
Right, and we resume tomorrow with another live witness.
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. At 10 o'clock. Thank you. 10 o'clock tomorrow then, please.